Welcome back to Big Country Politics on KTAB.
Well, hello and welcome to this week's Sunday Conversation here on Big Country Politics. This week our special guest is candidate for Abilene City Council Place 6, Miss Tammy Fogle. Tammy, thank you so much for joining the program today.
Yes, I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
We've seen you in a lot of different, you wear a lot of different hats, which is cool to see because that means you really kind of take an interest in your community. So very, very hyped, very excited about this conversation today.
I am too. I'm glad to be here.
Well, first and foremost, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from, and certainly how you made your way to Abilene, Texas?
Well, again, thank you for having me on the show and letting me share a little bit about myself. I'm actually from Grand Prairie. I came to Abilene from Grand Prairie, Texas, over 32 years ago to attend Hardin-Simmons University. And I met and married my husband and raised 4 kids here in Abilene. And our family was able to serve temporarily for a season in Israel, and then we returned to Abilene, which we consider our home, and continued serving here. It's all about people to me. I began engaging in conversations with members of our community about some concerns they had, and I then began to start looking into politics to see how to resolve these concerns. And as I pointed out these concerns that I heard from citizens, I became that nail and that sticks out that needed to be hammered in. And so here I am now running for city council in Abilene, Texas.
Also shout out to your husband, Patrick Fogle, a multimedia journalist, very good at what he does. I know he kind of handles your campaign stuff, so always appreciation for that. So, well, for some time now, we've seen you at multiple events surrounding the city, the county, or school district. On your Facebook page, you identify yourself as, and I found this interesting, as a native Texan, freedom seeker, and just an average citizen. So why make a run for public office, and how long has this been on your mind?
Well, it's all about serving people to me. I really had no aspirations to be anything in politics. So this is kind of a new venture for me. One of the things I'll say is I really wanted to help people understand how the city government works so they could be empowered to use their voice. And I thought by encouraging people to get involved would be very helpful, so we weren't doing this alone. And what I found was that as I became more knowledgeable about the city government, people would say, hey, you should run for city council. And I resisted at first because that's not really what I had my goals on. But as I began to watch and see what was happening in the community, concerns were coming up. Like, for example, and that really prompted me to change my thoughts on running for council, obviously. And one of those examples would be the $1 Million Dog Park. I just couldn't believe that we were spending $450,000 on our restroom. And that just seemed like a bridge too far for me. The other thing was the end of life for the libraries. I was really shocked downtown as how this library that's been falling to pieces over the last several decades was just going to be abandoned, and we were starting a new location because I know that people live in homes older than the city library, and they don't just watch it fall in disrepair. They take care of it so they can continue to use it, hopefully for future generations. And lastly, the rec centers being at end of life was also a concern because as I watched my opponent handle these different situations, I realized that he wasn't the advocate for change that we needed for our city because I see low voter turnout in city elections, and I know that people, have lost hope in using their voice, and I hope to restore that hope to people so that they can see that their voice matters.
Yeah, interesting. Well, you not only attend city council meetings, but school board meetings. What have you learned the most about local government, the municipalities, and how things run?
Well, first of all, I've learned that government moves very slow. I know that it's something that doesn't change on a dime, and I think that's actually a good thing. Most people are discouraged by it, but I feel like that gives us a path forward so that we can actually resolve the issues that we have and make change work to our advantage as citizens. And so also, I am really surprised about the more I engage in local government is that I really enjoy the experience. I enjoy getting to talk to people who are in the community, and they give me positive feedback, and then I'm able to immediately go, and the next time I see somebody working in that particular area, I can say, good job, listen to what I'm hearing from the community, and letting them know that there are positive things that people are seeing that they're working on. I've, of course, enjoyed building relationships with the people who are city employees here in town, and one of the things that I will say I've got to enjoy the most is getting to know how the different departments work and seeing how the city employees actually are working hard to make Abilene a place that people love to live. And I just have been more impressed with getting to know people on a personal level when it comes to local government, but it's been a great journey so far.
Yeah. Well, in September of last year, you appeared at a city council meeting talking about community input and involvement. regarding how items appear on the city council agenda. Transparency has been kind of a big thing with you, at least what we've kind of noticed when we watch the city council meetings. Expand on your argument, and if elected to the city council, what could we expect from you when it comes to involving the community when it comes to the agenda?
Well, you're right. Transparency is a big deal to me because I think when you see what's going on, then you're less concerned about what's not going on. You're not as distrustful of things that are happening. And so I think transparency shines a light on things that helps us to understand the bigger picture. And I think that's good. City council members are to serve the community with transparency. I think when it comes to the agenda and things like that, it should be full of transparency. While city packets that are available for each city council meeting, they're typically between 300 to 500 pages, and that's a lot. I think adding more information and including more things to be transparent is helpful because honestly, by reading those packets, that's where I've learned the most about the city government, how it works, how it functions, and I think it's really helpful for us to just be able to go back and access that information when we as citizens have questions or want to know where these ideas came from that are moving our city in a certain direction. And also, I think that, we look at city council meetings, they're always in the morning, and most people work a 9-to-5 job and are really not available to take off time. And so I think by shifting maybe at least one meeting to the afternoon where people can actually come to city council meetings, I know it will take a slow adjustment and people aren't going to be flocking to city council meetings, but I think by at least giving opportunity to attend a meeting is really important so that the citizens can give their feedback when necessary. One of the things I think is if we keep doing the same thing over and over again, it produces the same results. So let's try new things. Let's look for ways to actually actively engage our community because it's actually one of the strategic goals for the city council is how do we engage our community better? And I feel like it's a lost opportunity right now that I hope I can bring some change to when I get elected a council member.
Well, good deal. We're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, more with Tammy Fogle, candidate for Abilene City Council Place 6. We're talking about her vision for the council, for the city, if elected. That and more after break.
Welcome back to Big Country Politics on KTAB.
Well, welcome back to the Sunday Conversation here on Big Country Politics. This week our special guest is Tammy Fogle, candidate for Abilene City Council Place 6. She is challenging Travis Craver for his seat. Tammy, in a campaign video on your website, tammyforabilene.org, you list your top priorities. Number 3, reestablishing responsible spending. Number 2, prioritize public safety for all. And number 1, improving our streets and infrastructure. Prioritizing infrastructure and public safety are items candidates generally talk about a lot. Tell me about this reestablishing responsible spending. In your mind, what is the state of spending when it comes to the city council, and what are you bringing to the table to make a difference?
Right. Well, really, it's all about responsible spending because the city has a responsibility to make sure the city's streets, infrastructure, and public safety are all being taken care of. And you're right. Politicians say those top 2 priorities all the time because that's what the citizens want. And I think if we look and see, is it actually what the city council is doing in being fiscally responsible? For example, in 2022, the street maintenance fee was they added $2 more onto it, and they took more taxpayer money instead of just utilizing the taxpayer money they actually had. And so fixing the streets is responsible spending. Public safety is responsible spending. Going to building a dog park for $450,000 is not responsible spending. And I would think you would say that, if you ask most people in Abilene, the average home price is way more, is not even the price of that bathroom. And I think the problem is most people don't even know the price of that restroom. And so they don't even know that we're spending that way. And so this kind of spending is exactly what has gotten us into the over $500 million in debt as a city. And while I know most of that is, not most of it, there's some of that's interest. This generation is going to be paying for it as well as future generations, and we have to make sure that we don't put that burden off instead of taking care of it now when we have the opportunity to do so.
Let me ask you this. Blaze Reagan, Councilmember Blaze Reagan is somewhat kind of the Lone Ranger sometimes, and I've called him that too because sometimes he's the only one in opposition to the thing, to items. In fact, you mentioned the dog park. He was in opposition to that. If elected to the council, would that bother you in terms of, kind of if you were to go out on something like that? Would that in a sense bother you with that?
No, it doesn't bother me to go out because I believe that doing the right thing is the right thing. And sometimes you do it alone and sometimes you do it with other people. And I think part of it is sometimes we get in a rut of thinking that, this is what people want. And what I want to know is if I went out and talked to people in the city, I would say that the top priorities are not having a fancy restroom at the dog park. They want the streets fixed. And I think there's a great conversation that should be had. But also I think that it's important that we don't just do the same thing because we've always done it. And if the city asks for it and we have the cash on hand, we shouldn't spend it on things like a dog park. We should spend it on things that need to be taken care of. And so I've appreciated what Blaze Reagan has done, because he has actually brought out more discussion about items and allowing the citizens to see more of that transparency that we really long for. And so I don't have a problem with standing and doing the right thing alone, because it's the right thing.
Sure. On a campaign Facebook video, you made mention about the estimated $70 million airport bond that would be broken up into 3 phases to provide improvements and additions to a terminal that was built in 1968. It's a long time ago. With general obligation bonds, the city would still need to cover más o menos of about $20 million. What are your thoughts on the airport bond, and in your mind, does it make fiscal sense to embark on this renovation?
Well, what's interesting to note is that the city already put over $7 million on they spent $7 million last fall on ramps for this air tanker base that's going to be coming to Abilene. And so many citizens don't even know they were doing that. And so I think that also, if you look back just a few years ago, the airport was in an operational deficit. And so we have to look at the numbers and make sure it makes sense for us right now. I'm not too old to remember that in 2022, we did a bond for the $8 million for the fire station. In 2023, we did a bond for the $28 million in the rec centers and the $15 million in the zoo renovations. And so I know that we've been spending money, and we really have to keep our eye on what's important. I think that this is just bad timing right now. And while we're renovating parts of the airport as we go along, like I know that they had a recent renovation that they were able to do through the FAA grant, until we have a better source of funding, I really don't think that we can focus on this particularly, because we really need our money to be focusing on the things that matter, like streets and this upcoming $300 million that we're going to have to spend on improving our water infrastructure.
Well, from a new AI data campus to ACU's nuclear assault reactor and the arrival of the B-21 bomber, it's very exciting at Dias. A lot is set to make its way to the Key City if it's not here already. Tell me, what's your vision for the city in terms of growth if elected to the city council?
Well, you're right. There are a lot of new exciting opportunities coming to Abilene, and there's a lot of big changes, and I think we can be hopeful at some of the shifts that I think are going to happen in our city. And I'm interested to see how these different relationships come into play and how it works together, the city partners with these different entities coming in. But one thing I think we have to focus on is we can't forget about the small businesses. Small businesses are the bulk of growth in our city, revenue and just in our city life, and we need to make sure that we remember that small businesses are building the houses we live in. They're providing the jobs that to give us the money to put on our table. And so we cannot dismiss their impact and value that we have in our city. And lastly, we just need to make sure that we are also utilizing this growth to make sure the basic needs of citizens are being covered, because the individual citizens matter as well in this process, not just the great new jobs that are the big companies coming in. So I think that's something to keep in mind when moving forward.
What about 20 to 30 seconds? You have your own camera right over here. Tell us why voters here in Abilene should take a chance on Tammy Fogle for Abilene City Council Place 6.
Well, I think that I'd love to see the city get back to basics, because that's really what matters. And we need to make sure that we're providing for the citizens. I think we should be investing in other opportunities, but we have to cover the basics first before we can move on to other stuff. So you can catch me on Facebook at Tammy for Abilene, and you can also check out my website at tammyforabilene.org. And if I didn't answer any of the questions that you had on this particular interview, feel free to reach out to me, and I'd love to chat with you. Remember, Tammy Fogle for Abilene City Council Place 6.